Hello everyone, how are you today? Hopefully we are always in a good condition. Well, now let me introduce my group. My name is Ummi Mukhoyyaroh and my partner is Rika Setyawati. Here we are going to present our material in Sociolinguistics. It is about language policy and planning. Well, everyone, before we are going to know about the further information or material in this language policy and planning, let me give you the key concepts of this material. For the first, we will discuss about the goals of language policies, the government and the people, then how planning works or doesn't, and after that, we will discuss about the roles of ethnic and national identities in language policies. And the last one, we will discuss also about the role of English in the worldwide. I hope all of you can get many informations for this presentation. To prevent the continuity of communication in a country, especially in the country that has multicultural and multilingual like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and so on, it is important for the country to have a language planning. And of course, it must be started by language policy. So now I will tell you about what is the definition of language policy. Language policy is designed to favor or discourage the use of particular language or set of languages, such as what Algeria did lately, promoting Tamazight as the second official language in the constitution. After it was only a national language. Then the language policy also has a purpose. It is to make the communication in a country or national communication will be conducted well, without any social conflict and emotional conflict that can make the country will not be stable. Then the language planning is the conscious or deliberate efforts that aim at changing the linguistic behavior in a function, structure, or acquisition of a certain speech community. And why a language need a planning? According to Labov, language is a social attitude which is used by human or people in a country to communicate each other. So, by using the language planning, there will be some conflicts or many conflicts in a language, because as we know that a language may make some conflict in our life, even it is a word, it probably or possible that make a conflict. Next slide, it is about the types of language planning. There are two types of language planning. The first is status planning and the second one is corpus planning. Let's discuss it one by one. First, it is about status planning. It refers to the social and political positions a language will be assigned. It is an effort to decide or choose a dialect or language in a various dialect or languages to choose or decide it to be a certain language status. For example, in Indonesian setting, it is like a national language or formal language that is taken from a certain dialect from a region. Status planning is done by the government officials, and it includes the selection and the implementation stage of the language itself. For example, like in Quebec, Canada, politicians have raised the status of French by ordering that sign must give French more prominence. While the corpus planning refers to change or standardization of certain elements of the language, it is an effort to establish a term or the standardization of orthography, standardization of grammatical language, and also the standardization of the language in a practice. In this corpus planning, there are codification and also elaboration, and it is done by sociolinguists or linguists in general. Then, how about the history of language policy and planning? Haken was one of the first people who used the term language planning in his work on language standardization in Norwegian, where he described planning as concerning matters such as orthography, grammar, and lexicon, and both prescriptive and descriptive material. When we want to conduct research in language policy and planning, Recenter 2000 outlines three factors which have shaped research in language policy and planning. The first one, it is the micro-sociopolitical. The second one, it is about the epistemological, and the last one is the strategy. Then, the data from the language policy and planning must be based on good information, but sometimes the kind of information that go into planning decision are not very reliable. One issue to be addressed in language policy and planning is identifying the right kinds of data that must go into planning decision. In language policy and planning and nationalization slide, we will look at a variety of linguistic situations in Europe and the former Soviet Union to see some instances of planning. Then we will know about the language policy and planning in Turkey, in the Soviet Union, and the post-Soviet era, from Russification to nationalization, and official monolingualism in France. We will also know about the multilingual policy in Belgium. Then, let's see in the next slide. It is about language policy and planning in Turkey, which will discuss about orthography and purity. In Turkey, it reflects the social and political situation, where one of the issues shared with many other languages involves the ideology of purity of the language, this time with the encroachment of English word. While the language policy and planning in the Soviet Union and the post-Soviet era, it is from Russification to nationalization. One of the most important policies in this country was Russification, and in addition, the Cyrillic script was extended to nearly all the languages of the Soviet Union. The next one, it is the official monolingualism in French. French serves as a good example of a country which has a single national language and provides limited support to any other languages. Okay, everyone. My turn will be continued by my partner, Mbak Rika Setyawati, start from the discussion about multilingual policy in Belgium until the discussion about the language policy in English worldwide.
Well, thank you, Mbak Aya, for your explanation. And now I'm Rika. I'm going to discuss about multilingual policy in Belgium. The French-speaking Wallons and the Flemish, whose language is also called Flemish. Linguistically, a variety of Dutch coexists in a somewhat uneasy stretch in Belgium. Since the Kingdom of Belgium was founded in 1830, to this day and today, the two large ethnic groups, each of which control half of Belgium, namely the Flemish of Germany or Northern Europe, who are closer to Dutch culture, located in the north, are commonly called the Flanders region. They speak Dutch, which is a derivative of the Germanian language family. Meanwhile, in the South are better known as the Wallonia region bordering French, the Wallons as they are called, from Roman people or Southern Europe, who are closer to French culture. French is the mother tongue and the official language of the regional government of the Wallons. From here, all the differences began. Ladies and gentlemen, next, our discussion about LPP in post and new colonial context. One important consequence is that these newer states of Africa and Asia are often multilingual, but as a result of their histories, have elites who speak an European language such as English or French. And our discussion about Kenya and India. Now we are going to discuss about Kenya. Kenya is a country in Africa and specifically located in the southeastern part of Africa. Swahili and English are official languages. In 1974, President Kenyatta of Kenya declared that Swahili was to become the second official language of the country and the language of national unity. So, Swahili here serves as the main lingua franca between the various ethnic groups, and English is used, and it is expected that children should be conversant enough to functionally communicate in English. India, with more than 1 billion people, is another country which has had to face the difficulty of finding a lingua franca. In this case, the solution has been to promote Hindi in the Devanagari script as the official language that unites the state. But English may also be used for official purposes and in a parliament. Although Hindi is promoted as the unifying language of India, many Indians now see such promotion to be at the expense of some other Indian language they speak, or a set of religious beliefs, or the opportunity to acquire a word language like English. Language planning in India, however, is largely confined to elites, the masses whose needs are more immediate, are largely unaffected.
LPP in the United States and Canada. The United States has no official language, but Canada has two. Although neighbors and both once colonized by the British, these countries have gone down very different paths in terms of language policies and planning. Language planning has become a serious concern in the United States in recent years, particularly as a result of a recognition that there is a large indigenous Spanish speaking population and because of continued immigration. The United States doesn't have an official language, although there have been repeated attempts since 1982 to make English the official language. There are three main areas of concern for policies regarding the use of languages other than English in the United States. The first is in education, and the second one is in workplace practice and policies, and the final area in which language policies are disputed has to do with providing services in languages other than English. The services include some things as access to voting materials or driver's license examination forms in other languages. The basic English-French polarization still exists. The French are still a minority in Canada. The language situation is further complicated by the fact that Canada also has many speakers of First Nation languages. The term used for the languages spoken in these regions before English and French colonization. And it is also a country of immigrants who have flocked mainly to the large cities, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. All of these countries are multilingual and the languages have many different roles in society. Now we are going to discuss about multilingual countries and LPP in Papua New Guinea and Singapore. Papua New Guinea has three official languages, Hirimotu, Tokpisin, and English. Of the three official languages, Tokpisin is becoming more the first language of many young people, particularly city dwellers. Hirimotu, another official language of Papua New Guinea, is also pidgin-based. It is identified with Papua and Papuan languages, which are quite different from those in New Guinea. Many people there take great pride in using Hirimotu, the descendant of Polisi Motu, a native-based pidgin language of the area rather than Tokpisin to show local loyalties. The result has been a dramatic increase in the use of Hirimotu in Papua New Guinea, particularly among separatist-minded Papuans. In addition to these three official languages, there has also been language planning to use local languages in primary education. In terms of policy, English is set apart from the Asian languages with the mother tongue policy, where all children are required to have some proficiency in their mother tongues. Despite this mother tongue policy, the most recent census data saw an increase in English as the language most frequently spoken at home. Well,
Next, in this session, we will focus on these last issues and focus on endangered languages and the spread of English around the world. According to Harrison in 2007, expresses a similar view, language disappearance is an erosion of ideas, of ways of knowing, and ways of talking about the world and human experience. Estimates of language loss go as high as 95% within the new century if nothing is done to stop the decline. It is for just such a reason that the Linguistic Society of America has gone on record as deploring language loss and established a committee on endangered languages and their preservation to help arrest it. However, it should be noted that many sociolinguistic and especially linguistic anthropologists are very much concerned with language documentation as well as providing assistance to communities who wish to revitalize their heritage languages. Well, in our last discussion about English worldwide, in 2000, the European Commission reported that a survey of European population showed that close to 80% of the populations of the Netherlands, Sweden, and Denmark claimed to be able to speak English. The corresponding percentage for Finland, Luxembourg, and Austria were 50% or better. For Belgium, Germany, and Greece, about 40%. And for France, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, they ranked down from 30 to 15%. Furthermore, about 87% of secondary students were learning English, and the proportion for primary students was about 40%. According to Wright, 2004, on his conclusion beyond the European Union, it is not inconceivable that as intergroup communication happens increasingly in English, speakers from the smaller language groups will move from being bilingual in their own language and the national language to being bilingual in their own language and English. This latter bilingualism might be more stable than the former. There is a paradox here. Linguists are sometimes told that they save languages best by not acting at all. Certainly, they should do nothing to promote English in the world or to standardize a language, or possibly to help in any kind of language planning everywhere. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all about my explanation in our discussion. With pleasure, if any question and addition in our materials, thank you very much for your attention and see you.